Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce Nick, who's going to demystify zero trust. And I'm super excited about this presentation because I've seen zero trust as a marketing, dark blockchain, AI driven machine learning solution. But Nick is a technical guy, so he's going to get deep on what it actually means. Take away, Nick, and thank you for joining Beercon 2.
Sweet, thank you so much. Yeah, like you said, it's a marketing term that's been thrown around. But firstly, thanks everyone for coming to my talk. I just want to thank the beer farmers and everyone, all the mentors, that basically like accommodating for me to do this. So I'm super excited, first time, very fucking nervous. Um, just a quick thing about the mustache. I'm dressing up as my avatar, Cheech from Cheech and Chong. But it's very uncomfortable, so I'm gonna take that off. Um, yeah, cool. Let's get to it. So, quick little introduction. Who am I? I'm a content engineer for Immersive Labs. Been there for the past 3 years. I've studied forensic computing and security at Bournemouth Uni. Um, Giant metalhead. I play guitar. I love prog metal. Throw anything music, rock and metal related to me. I'll happily talk about it. I also have a strong interest in offensive security and threat intel, which is kind of the direction I'm going towards. Cool. So before anyone starts rolling their eyes and saying, "Oh, great, zero trust, what now?" Just a quick little note on why I'm doing the talk. 3, 4 weeks ago, prior to even signing up to Beercon, I was like, I've been seeing the word zero trust being thrown around on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and I just started my blog, and so I thought, I need something to talk about. I'm always at a loss for what to talk about on a blog, so I thought, screw it, I'll take zero trust, see what comes up, and I thought this is a great opportunity to kind of to research this, to research something, to have an opinion on something. So I did. So I'm going to take this into my first blog post later on as well. And it's just, I thought I'd take a chance to clear the air of zero trust. I don't think I've really seen much of that. There's been some talks at RSA, but no one wants to sit through a 45-minute talk. Some guys are yammering on about it. Rather just a 20-minute talk. Cool. Oh, mistake. So, what the heck is zero trust? Zero trust is a security model designed by John Kinderberg in 2010. He's an ex-Forrester employee. And essentially, zero trust focuses around the verification across a company's network, effectively removing all forms of trust within the organization. That's where the quote, never trust, always verify comes from. It's often seen as a solution for preventing insider threat. It's been around for a while, for I think 2010, like you said. So I was just curious as to why it's been popping off now. What is zero trust? Why is it happening now? A lot of while I was doing the research, a lot of people compared it with the castle and moat example, the castle and moat approach, which is essentially your organization protecting itself from external threats. Which is great, but that lacks focus on internal threats, such as data exfil or PAI theft. Then it got me thinking, why is there no visual representation for zero trust? Everyone's talking about castle and moats, and it's easy to describe that, easy to like visualize that. So I decided to take it in my own hands and propose my own example with a visual representation of it working in real time. I had to think of it as a bouncer verifying your ID, before he or she lets you stumble your drunken ass into the club. Just kind of like that's it for, but I appreciate my custom GIF making. So how does it work? While I was researching this topic, so many different websites were saying top 10 principles, top 5 principles, top 3, top 70, top 43. I'm like, I need something. This divert me from what I'm trying to do. But from all these articles I read, the key takeaway were these 5 areas of focus, which is data, network, people, infrastructure and operations, and the devices in the organization. So firstly, data. It's an obvious one. It's a gold mine. You know, that's what the hackers / criminals are looking for the most. The focus for this is to essentially protect it. It's an obvious one, but it's often forgotten. It's important to understand where the data is stored in the company, how the confidential data is stored, what is the value of the data. On the network side of things, it's another obvious one. You know, you think of network and security, you want to protect the network. But what's the purpose of that? You know, you want to prevent people from traversing the network when they get in, if someone does get in, stop them moving laterally across your network. So this could be taking action of disabling any services that aren't needed on your servers or your hosts, or even implementing methods like multi-factor authentication, which is a necessity now. Like, if you're not doing it, you're a loser. Thirdly, the people. Everyone knows the humans are the weakest link in any system. Just read The Art of Human Hacking. It's important as well to enforce policies on how users can access the system and what they have access to, as well as monitoring their usage and behavior, not just online or logical, but physical networks too. So, you know, what's their the premise security, what's physical security? Do you have any biometric scans, things like that? The infrastructure and operations. So this took me a while to understand, but I think I saw it in this perspective of you know, the entire tech stack of a company. You know, that's what you should be looking to secure. How are the internal apps, customer-facing apps? How are they designed? How are they developed? Is there security built in, or do they just want to sit and put out fires after it's been pushed to production? The devices is a common one. The attacker isn't on the outside. The attacker could be an employee. They could be a contractor. They could be a subcontractor. There's someone they could be given credentials to. Like, the devices are, it's an obvious one, really. I don't want to really get too much into it. So yeah, it's a difficult one because everyone's moving towards cloud now. Moving towards other new technologies isn't an easy job. There's no security pill to buy from the software pharmacy that'll patch up your crappy systems. Zero trust is essentially, it's a perspective companies should adapt in a way to stay resilient and stay growing. So I wanted to kind of go over the techniques that that you could implement that go along with zero trust. There's plenty of different ones out there that are involved with zero trust, but I thought I'd take a couple of them. So first of them would be identity verification and access controls. Things like this could be biometric scanners for physical security or authorization tokens. You know, good example of that could be even using YubiKey when you're signing into your LastPass, or even just your internal login app or an intranet or something. The second one I found really interesting was the principle of least privilege. I've learned about it at uni, but seeing it in practice, especially at work, is interesting as well. This is obviously restricting the permissions and giving access to users that need it, that are, like, you know, that's necessary for certain users. So this ties in with designing the internal application with security built in. Who needs access to this? Is it the entire company? Is it people in sales? Do people in finance need this thing, or is it just the guys in dev? Is it just an internal thing, internal to the team? Thirdly, and finally, was microsegmentation. This is an example of this could be setting up DMZs on the network, breaking down the workflow into smaller segments with the necessary policies in place. So this leads me on to why. There's plenty of different models out there. Why would you go with zero trust? It's not really anything new in my perspective. You know, good example. Another good example of this, or comparatively, is the defense in depth principle. But that's rather a framework, and it's a staple in the community, in the security industry. But I wouldn't say it's comparable because there's no technique to it. It's a guide. zero trust is, I don't know, I feel it's too new. In my opinion, it isn't a product or a service. It's more of a conceptual value to a system. It's something companies should work towards. Almost like implementing any other security policy or strategy. It needs to be worked in, especially now with the way the world is. It's almost necessary to think about implementing something like zero trust. You know, with the remote working, companies going full remote during COVID. It's a step in the right direction, in my opinion. Everyone and their dad is moving towards cloud, so why not make it a lasting move rather than a throwaway solution? While I was looking into this, there was companies like CrowdStrike, Okta, Akamai, and Cyberknight have actively implemented it. And by that, I mean they're talking about it. They're saying, look, we're doing this. We're moving towards this direction. But as well, they're also the companies that are trying to sell it. So I'm like a bit skeptical. Like, were you trying to sell me this? Which is, I'm using the CrowdStrike image as an example here. And yeah, so that leads me to my final slide. To me, zero trust it just seems like a bunch of security strategies that already exist wrapped up in a big pretty box with a name that says zero trust slapped on the side of it. Perhaps it's a good thing that it's a buzzword. It brings to light the techniques and strategies that organizations should be putting in place on the networks and systems, and that there's actually value in worrying about your security strategy and doing something about it early on, instead of having to fight fires when the hackers take all your sweeties. Perhaps companies should start treating themselves and gift themselves with a big pretty box with the word zero trust slapped on the side of it. And that's me. Any questions?
So I have a question. Oh, sorry, Yan, you want to take it over?
No, I don't know what your question is, and somebody was supposed to tell me what the questions were.
Okay. So Google, they have the Beyond Corp. Have you looked into that? What are your thoughts on that, if you have?
Beyond Corp, I came across it while I was doing, like, some people on Reddit were talking about Beyond Corp. I never took the opportunity to look into it too much. But I think it's a lot of people are tying it with zero trust. Like, it's not a separate entity.
Yeah, so
it kind of goes back to working with both frameworks.
Yeah, the concept of Beyond Corp is you can work from anywhere off any device, and it actively like monitors the device. Like, do you have the latest updates? Yes. Okay. Good.
Right.
You don't. I'm going to lower your level of access because I don't trust you as much. What are your thoughts around that? Like, how do you see that helping businesses like get to where we need to?
I think it's like I mentioned before, especially in a time like we're in now. Loads more companies are going remote. So having that sort of policy, that system in place that monitors your devices, it's a good thing, especially when people are starting to implement BYOD. You know, how do you monitor such things? If you can't, say a company can't afford to give them custom desktops or laptops, they have to use their own. How do you manage the data coming in and out?
I sort of want to pivot off of that question. So there's two areas that I want to talk about. The first is, I think zero trust or working in a zero trust framework should be as transparent to the user as possible. And I would suggest that if it's not, it sets up for a very adversarial relationship between IT security and the rest of the business. Do you have some
100%.
ideas around that? Yeah.
I don't have any kind of proposals around that, but I will 100% agree with you there on the side of transparency, because you nailed it on the head. If there's a division between IT security and the rest of the company, not just technically, but there's going to be a division in the personality side of things, the human side of it, how they're treated, how the team's treated, which will ultimately affect the workflow. So having the transparency is key.
Sort of a follow-on to this, if somebody was looking at zero trusting their small, medium, or even a larger enterprise, where do you feel they should start? Like, how would you move from like, hey, right now we have a very typical business network. It's a flat network. You know, do you start at the gateway? Do you start with Active Directory? Like, where would you go?
In my idea, my head, I'd start with maybe controlling user access, and so things like enabling single sign-on on applications they might use. Even if it's not internal, they use third-party apps. These third-party apps do have single sign-on integration. So it's a simple thing to implement, so why not?
Cool.
I have a pivot question off single sign-on, if you don't mind. So for a lot of businesses, single sign-on sounds like the absolute, you know, bee's knees, dog's bollocks. This is going to solve all your problems. The problem is a lot of apps like Slack or other big, you know, kind of enterprise level, or we can integrate with your environment. The costing for it is astronomical. I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult to link up to an Active Directory server or something like that. I mean, what's the route then for small to medium-sized businesses to be able to still get the same shit and still follow basically your guidance?
That's a key point. I've not really looked into that too much because I'm not too well versed in single sign-on and the technology behind it and how much. I didn't know it costed that much, or I don't know, specific amount, but it's something worth looking into for sure.
Yeah, I just find it really it
is quite interesting that it can affect something like that.
Yeah, I always find that when you're working with enterprise level businesses or public sector where they've got the money or they've got the resource, they've already got a relationship there, it's incredibly easy for them to theoretically roll that stuff out. The only question is obviously money and implementation and actually getting it through regulators and all that other nonsense. The problem doesn't come from those guys. It usually comes from the small to medium that are just starting to kind of come into that, trying to follow a zero trust framework, policy, whatever you want to bill it as. That can be quite out the reach, and that could actually impact on making it less transparent for the user, more of a ball ache for them to actually, you know, use the services, use the tools, use the third-party apps or whatever the hell they're using, more of a ball ache. And then you add this zero trust layer on top of it, it becomes even more of a ball ache, and they end up hating tech.
That's true, actually. Yeah, it's a tough one.
I've got a question or a couple of points. So the technology that Sean was talking about a few minutes ago that Google have adopted, well, Microsoft are doing the same thing. And
that's it, yes.
You know, so you've got Intune, and so if you're a 365 user, there is things like device control, conditional access. You know, we see it in our team where I work, where somebody will have logged in from an IP address that Microsoft thinks is risky, and therefore there are rules in place or controls in place that maybe limit that user's access and what they can actually do. We then do a little bit of investigation and find that they logged in via a VPN, and the IP address was in the States.
Yeah.
So we are kind of implementing zero trust without calling it zero trust.
That's exactly my point here, that people are already doing this, companies are already implementing these techniques and strategies, but it's not framed in such a way. It's not saying, oh, look, here's zero trust. I'm doing zero trust.
Yeah. And I think removing the word trust from the discussion.
Yeah.
In going back to Ian's earlier point about, you know, creating division or avoiding creating division, then maybe removing trust is a good idea, because there's an implication that you don't trust people, right? Clue is in the title. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
And if you don't trust them, then they don't trust you, and no one trusts anybody, and you've got a potentially pretty unhealthy working environment in which we're all actually trying to get on the same team and pull in the right direction. So those were just the 2 points I wanted to make.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It makes sense of, like, logically speaking, if all you have to do is verify, it sort of strengthens the process. There's nothing else to worry about. You don't have to worry about one person talking over the other or handling the data over the other.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have had one question from the audience, from Juan, saying, have you seen zero trust solutions from providers such as SAP or Oracle?
Not really. I stumbled across any. I do know Microsoft have their own zero trust team though, which was quite intriguing. Like they have a separate unit of Microsoft that's just focused on zero trust, but not with SAP or Oracle. I'm sure they would though. I mean, the size of their companies.
No worries. I'm sure if one wants to expand on that question, you guys know each other. You're in the Slack together. I'm sure you can expand upon it. But thanks for asking it.
Cool.
We have had a kind of off the cuff shitposty style question. Top 5 favorite bands.
Top 5 favorite bands of the spot: Gojira, Monuments, Tesseracts, AC/DC, and Moontooth.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
so one I know.
I'm
Right.
going to say I've heard of one of those bands.
Yeah.
They're all a bit
Welcome
shouty.
to prog metal. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Representing Gojira back.
Brilliant. Well, listen, thank you very much for that, Nick.
No worries. Thank you guys so
I
much.
think it's the takeaway I've got is that it's not a one prong approach. Yep, you've got to marry up the technology and get the business engaged with it, bring people with you, and by doing that, then you can collectively,
Exactly.
produce a good outcome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Strong stuff, man. Great job.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, Nick. Thank you very much, mate.